Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear us? This is Mike Elmey with U.S. Forest Service. I'm going to turn over to Randy.
Hold on, Mike. Yeah, I was on mute, unfortunately. Well, good afternoon, everybody in the Eastern Time Zone, and good morning to those that are in the Central and Mountain and Pacific Time Zone. We want to thank you for joining this webinar today from the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance. We appreciate your attendance. Today, we are pleased to be able to have our rescheduled Wild Spotter webinar brought to you through the auspices of Mike Elmey from the Washington office of the Forest Service and Chuck Bargeron of the University of Georgia. Before we let them turn it over to them, just want to remind everybody that this is a series of webinars that the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance promotes to provide for the wilderness stewardship community, to bring topics of interest, subjects, problems, solutions that would be helpful to you, a series that we are calling Wilderness Challenges. And we all know that the spread of invasive species is one of the most pervasive and deadly challenges that the wilderness of today faces. As climate changes and as species move, as more people enter into wilderness areas, we are seeing the outcrop, the cropping up of new invasive species in all of our wilderness areas, not just plants, but animals and other sorts of invasives, insects, disease. So trying to find ways to combat those vectors, those invasive species is an important task for wilderness managers. And so we're very pleased today to have Mike Elmey from the Washington office of the Forest Service. He is the National Invasive Species Manager. He's been in the Washington office for the last 17 years. After starting out his career with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a wildlife refuge manager, working both as a refuge specialist and wildlife biologist and as a wilderness manager. And for a short time, he served as the National Wilderness Program Manager for the Fish and Wildlife Service. We're pleased also to have Chuck Bargeron from the University of Georgia. In his role as the Center for Invasive Species there at the university, he's on the front lines of trying to create tools and techniques that will be useful for the practitioner in the battle against invasives. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike. Mike will make a presentation about the Wild Spotter, and then we will open it up for questions and discussion at the end of the presentation. So Mike, take us away.
All righty. Thanks again, Randy. And for everyone joining in today, I'm happy to have you. Let's talk a little bit about where we came from before we got to this Wild Spotter program. We came from an arena where the invasive species problem is just eating our lunch, as we say, from so many different angles and so many different landscapes. And it's really an integrated problem across all the things we do in our agency, but also with other agencies at the federal and state level, and tribes are having impacts by invasive species, and communities and private landowners and businesses. It's wreaking havoc. It's over $138 billion a year economic impact to our country annually across the spectrum of invasives. There's a huge call for awareness at all levels. There's so many programs that are trying to fight this at different scales, but it's tough. So we got to do more, and we got to do more for the things we love, the things we care about. You know, whether it's your school, your business, or your home, or your farm, or your ranch, or your wilderness area, things you care about, where people are stepping up to help. So the Forest Service was struggling with some capacity problems, and we've had this issue for years, shifts in priorities and shifts into other arenas that have left our ability to function against these invaders very limited. So we looked into the situation we have currently and found that, you know, the strength in our visiting public has been untapped in so many ways. And there are thousands, if not millions of people every year out on these public lands, out on these forests, out on these refuges and parks and other places. And they're enjoying themselves, having a good time, and they're, you know, loving these natural areas. And those areas are also being impacted, so it's affecting their ability to enjoy these places. So these wild places are just as vulnerable as a crop or a farm or a business or a waterway. And we realize if we can build capacity with all these people who visit, we will be farther ahead in helping to target these invaders and bring these ecosystems back online, protect these native species, keep these ecosystems from being transformed in many ways. So we moved into this arena with a focus initially on special places like wilderness areas and wild and scenic rivers and research natural areas and some of these specially designated sites that are overlays on an existing public land base like ours. In the Forest Service, we have over 35 million acres of wilderness, about 5,000 river miles of wild and scenic rivers that are designated by Congress, and dozens of other locations of special significance across the landscape, including cultural areas and, you know, special study areas and ecosystems that are unique that we protect. And these are also at risk from invasives. So we're part of a larger national wilderness preservation system. Many of you know all this already, so I don't want to waste my time trying to teach you things you already know, because you could teach me a lot about this. But it's a big system in the federal sector, and we really want to keep it intact. And so we targeted wilderness areas and wild and scenic rivers, and we realized that by creating a program to build the citizen science capacity, we could get into areas that we don't have the capacity to get into. We can find these things before they get established and really spread. These early infestations, these small infestations, whether they be plant or animal or insect or disease or whatever it happens to be, the longer you wait to deal with them, the harder it is to deal with them. And of course, the more cost it is and the greater impact and the less likelihood of success. So we took this on as a real big challenge. There really hasn't been anything like this in the whole country, certainly nothing with this focus. And so we start off with the concept of creating a citizen science mapping invasive species in America's wild places. And it just exploded into a whole program called Wild Spotter. So we are here, Wild Spotter. It's got a brand logo. It's got a unique identity. When you see this all over the country, it's the same program. And we quickly realized that it wasn't going to be just for wilderness areas on national forests. It turns out it's not going to be just for the Forest Service. It turns out that so many other places need to do the same thing. They didn't have capacity. So mapping invasives in America's wild places has really blossomed into a, coast to coast, corner to corner, north to south, east and west program. And now we've got partners in Canada reaching out to us, interested in joining forces with us, Mexico as well. We've even had contact from people overseas like India thinking, hey, can we do this? Can we have Wild Spotter mapping invasives in India's wild places or Mexico's wild places? So, it's really something we can all chip in and find a place to sit on this one. There's no chairs going to be missing when the music stops. So you'll be part of this anywhere you go once it really grows. So right now, we're talking about the U.S. And the focus is wild spotter in America and the National Forest System is our focus. We're expanding to other areas, and I'll talk to you more about these components right now. So there's 4 basic pieces to this. Start off with, there's a national website, and that's where you want to work these days, as the technology is available and people have access to things on the internet. And so we put a lot of the material that normally would have been in paper form, creating trash and litter and so on, into an electronic form wherever we can, and reach out to a much broader audience, and materials about Wild Spotter, information about Wild Spotter, and all kinds of other pieces of the Wild Spotter program are based in the website online. Very simple to get to, www.wildspotter.org. Can't miss it. And if you're out there on your internet now while we're talking, feel free to Google it and give it a shot. And you'll notice on this slide I'm showing you, there's 5 circles of color and a little image inside. Those are these are design features that you'll see across the whole program, help you quickly orient to where you want to go, what you want to do, how it functions. They're also tied into the apps that we'll show you later. So let's start with this. National website, protocols, inventory, mapping information, and each of these wild places will have a customized site built with it. So there's a picture here that you see on the top right of a part of a wilderness area in the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. They have amazing landscapes up there. It's just beautiful and wild, small by comparison to some of the western wilderness areas, but these are remnants of the landscape that was there during the big Wisconsin glaciation period, 10 or 15,000 years ago. This is land that was basically intact once they retreated. So lots of things to think about here, how wilderness perspectives may differ around the country. And so we try to customize things for wherever you happen to be. And that's based in the website. Another major component of the Wild Spotter program is the technology behind it. And there's an acronym here called EDDMAPS, EDDMAPS. It's an early detection and distribution mapping system. This is a system that was built through the University of Georgia at the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. They're one of our major partners. They have worked with groups, organizations, governments, state, federal, tribal, international, all around North America, and has really created a system to help collect, identify species, collect information about those species and those invasions, and map those in a simple form and have that information available to share, which is important when you want to collaborate and work with your neighbors and your partners out there, to share the data you have. So this is a foundational component of our Wild Spotter program. It's designed to help fit in with the EDDMAPS platform. So very similar material, same concepts, same connectivities. And in this EDDMAPS platform, we make it simple for the data collection to be done in the field using the modern technology of cell phones, modern technologies of iPhones and Android devices. Using those free apps, you can help find and map and do a lot of things on the ground out there while you're having fun in these wild places. A third component of this program goes beyond just the science side and the ecology side and the mapping side. It gets into the marketing promotion side, reaching out to groups and people and organizations and just even families is important in this regard. We want to bring them the idea of wilderness stewardship. We want them to understand the necessity of dealing with these things in these wild places in a proactive manner. And while they're out enjoying and taking care of these places, they're actually making a difference scientifically. So talking to them about why invasive species are a threat, what they can do to help find these, and target these groups in a very professional marketing manner, networking, and of course, there's so many different media to use. It's video sources of social media of all kinds, print media, advertisements, radio and television. This goes on and on. And we want to use all these components the best we can to get that message out and connect people to what we're doing and connect them back to the land. So in this picture, you'll notice a series of examples of the kind of print ads that we've been able to get some really good traction with across the country to help promote the Wild Spotter program, to reach different types of demographics, different audiences. It's not always just the outdoor type people, It's not just the hikers or the campers or even the hunters or fishermen. Sometimes it's communities and business people. Sometimes it's the folks who do skiing and tourism kind of programs. They're in the arena of drawing in customers for profit who come to enjoy these outdoor areas. And so trying to reach out to these different kind of people takes a many different pronged approach from a marketing and promotional standpoint. And we've got groups like Wildlife Forever and University of Georgia and others helping us make that connection where we can. So that's part of this, is getting this networking and connectivity built. And one of the real bottom lines for that is to build the capacity for volunteer recruitment and coordination. So this is really to help get people engaged and draw them in as a full partner, as a citizen scientist, to help us map and find invasive species in areas that ordinarily we don't have the staff or time to get to. They're out there already. We want to make sure it's fun. They're already giving up their time, so let's make sure it's not a burden for them. We want their technology skills to be used easily, because they're a lot smarter than people like me. I'm too old to figure out the technology. That's why we got people like Chuck on here. These people nowadays, it comes natural to them. So let's capitalize on technology and marshal their forces, because even in the most remote wilderness areas, you can actually collect things electronically without a cell signal, without internet connections, and so forth. So there's all kinds of things we're able to employ in this program to build that volunteer coordination and build that recruitment. Working with organizations like the Corps Network, the conservation corps around the country, organizations that are involved in stewardship of the land or visitor services or public use, just generally communities and even schools. So this group, the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance, is exactly a target here. We want to make sure that groups like this, who already have found their calling and really care about these very important and unique wild places, they're already giving their time. They're already making a difference. And so let's empower them and strengthen them and give them the tools they need to make it even better. And of course, with the goal of helping us pin down these invasions so we can do something about them and keep these wild places from losing their unique character, not to mention the ecology of these areas. So it's a cultural thing. For people in the wilderness arena, you go out into these beautiful areas, you don't want to hear trucks. You don't want to see, people and buildings and smokestacks. You want to get out there and fit into a landscape that brings to you some sort of spiritual drive. And invasive species affect that greatly. You come to North America and you want to see something just spectacular and beautiful and wild and untrammeled, and you don't expect it to be degraded or look like something from Kazakhstan or South America, or the loss of the birds because some species is wiping out their productivity, or trees you don't recognize, or increasing fire risks that are burning things down, or the damage to rare plant communities from invasive species like hogs or the loss of bats even, from diseases that are invasive. So the native community really needs our help, and the wilderness community has always been there to help wilderness in the toughest times, and this is a way to empower them. And volunteers need to be recognized, volunteers need to be supported. And so WildSpotter includes components of training and awards and special things to help incentivize their service. It is volunteerism. It is for free at their expense and not ours. So we really need to be part of a program to thank them and support what they're doing. That's the fourth component here. So let's talk a little bit more about the technology. So basically the idea here is you're out there having fun, you're enjoying the outdoors, whether you're hiking the trail or rock climbing or skiing or whatever you happen to be doing out in that wilderness area, and you have a chance to spot something. You have a chance to take some information down in a very, very simplistic manner so it doesn't delay your trip, so it doesn't burden you, it doesn't cause you to have to carry a big clipboard full of paper or worry about something getting lost or broken. You simply can do this in a matter of seconds and move on. And it's really at your own pace. So we don't pressure anybody with this. It's at their own pace. If they're sitting around the campfire and they remembered, oh yeah, I saw this new patch of weeds or something on the trail about a mile back, you can still map that right there at the campfire while you're sitting there eating dinner hours later. And you can go and do it immediately while you're on the trail too. You can do the same thing by stopping and taking a snapshot. Hey, I'm not sure if this is the right thing. I think I see something exotic. Here's a picture, and you upload it with the app. It will reload and resend all that material when you get back into cell coverage range, so you don't have to worry about it until you get back home. But all that data is collected for you pretty simply, and then you go on with your business and enjoy your outdoor experience. So that's the idea here. These apps are free. There's no charge. You can use them. You can download them as many times as you want, and there are all kinds of upgrades that are continually happening with these. So we add new wild places. We have new functionality, and all that's available to you, again, for free. It'll work on iPhones or iPads or Android devices. You go to your Google Play Store or your App Store at Apple and just go for it. You can do it right now while we're talking. And as more upgrades happen, you'll get notices and you can upgrade the system to get the next hot stuff coming off WildSpotter. Inside this, again, it's a pretty simple system. You swipe through introductory slides, you get to pick your wild place, and actually you're going to have an opportunity here pretty soon to add a new wild place on your own, and then further details come later through the national website. In the app, on your iPhone or your, in case, Android, very simplistic drop-down menus, very easy to move through. You notice those icons I was telling you earlier, those colorful images, those are in here. You'll see those. So every time you see that image, you'll be able to go to the right spot. You'll know what you're looking for. If you want to map something, if you want to learn more about the invasive species or more about the wild place, if you need help with the species ID, it's all in there as well. So the app is pretty powerful. Once you get in, you have to sign in. We want a little bit of information about you. This is not the kind of thing where you end up having someone sell your contact information to a clearinghouse for new magazines or hiking equipment or something, and you end up getting junk mail. This is simply for us to help acknowledge and thank you for the service you provided and keep track of this. We want people to know that what they did mattered. So it's not a lot of information. There's not a lot of personal stuff here. Basic, simple contact. And you can decide what that is. The reason is what we find in volunteerism is that if you don't thank the volunteer for what they've done, they kind of get tired of helping you. And if they don't know that what they did mattered, there's no feedback loop, sometimes there's a question whether they should even come back and help you again later. So we wanted that tends to be the basics, so we have that tied into here. And then, of course, you can move around in this. You can go to different wild places. So if you visit one location 1 month and the next week you go to someplace else, you know, you can change it anytime you want. All that stuff gets set up in a queue, and unless you're in self-coverage area, it'll sit there safe and sound until you get back to the big city, for example. Okay, we talked a little bit about the account sign-in. Again, very simple. You tell us what you want, how we connect with you, and we keep it all private and secret inside this system until we need to connect with you or you need to connect with us. And I'll show you later about the connection back through the email account for WildSpot. Species ID is important because we're not all expert invasive species specialists. You see, I'm talking a lot about plants here, but this is really for all taxa. We can do this for lots of different species. So, you know, you can talk about invasive pigs or invasive mussels or invasive plants or, you know, things that kill trees, invasive insects or something. There's all kinds of different invaders out there, and we need your help to find them. One of the things we're moving pretty fast on is having the ability to preload some information for the specific wild place you're in. So if you're going to, let's say, the Bob Marshall Wilderness in Montana, the National Forest that manages that has already provided us with information about that wild place, information about the species they're targeting that they need help finding, and those would be already built into the system, so you don't have to go digging around looking for something. So if you're looking for Dalmatian towflax, you can click right on it because we know in that wild place they're looking for Dalmatian towflax, and it's right there. All you need to know about Dalmatian towflax is handy and ready to roll. For things that are new, that aren't built into this already, there's also a way to connect back to get that information online later on. But to simplify that, there's a photographic capacity that allows you to snap a picture, take a photo of what you saw, and later on that can help you validate and help us verify that the record is a good record, and it will go upload into the system. If you remember, I talked to you earlier about sharing information. That's one of the big positive things about EdMaps is they really have the ability to network this and share information. One thing you don't want to do is share bad information. So we want to be able to provide information upwardly and connect it to other groups only when it's the right information and when it's been validated. And that's all handled on our end. So don't feel bad if you make a mistake. If you take a picture of a native species and you think you got an invader and you keep all the records in here on it, it's very simple. It only takes you a few seconds to upload a data set for a population you find. After that point, we take care of the rest. If it's not going to work, we'll let you know. If it turned out to be a native or something that wasn't invasive, we'll let you know, and it'll be not uploaded into the system. So we don't want to have a lot of duplications and mistakes in the system because, again, we're dealing with the public who, on average, may not be savvy to some of this stuff, but they're trying to help anyway. So we want to validate their support. We want to give them some credibility by beefing up their capacity to see and understand and identify. But if there's something new and they can't figure it out, and we realize it's not going to fit, we won't worry about keeping that record. But a lot of times people are pretty sharp. They'll see something, they're not sure what it is, but it just doesn't look right because they've been out on that trail so long or they've been in that river for so many years, and it just stands out as something unique and different. Those are the kind of things we're looking for. And they'll take a picture of it to let us know, and sure enough, it's an invader, and they are the first ones to find it, and they saved the day because it prevented something getting established and spreading. When I talked earlier about the wild places, I said we preloaded a lot of these things in here because they were some of the big projects we started with, and so there's a lot of data on those special places. In this case is an example of the Lincoln National Forest and the 3 ranger districts there that they have, and it talks a lot about that forest and the areas in it, including the wilderness areas. That's down in New Mexico, by the way. So data collection and mapping is really our basic foundation here, Volunteerism is the key. Citizen science is the whole idea. We're even moving to new technologies such as samples. So you don't necessarily need to see something to find it. So you can take a soil sample or a water sample. We can do eDNA testing on that, and that's going to be the next step here, where we have volunteers out there in the wilderness, and they can take a water sample with a process that we would validate and make sure they use the right materials to do so. And you can test that to see if you have, say, zebra mussels in that water, or a mud sample, and you can verify if a feral pig or invasive species have been in that area. Some of these mobile vertebrates are like that, or fish. So there's a lot of things like that that can help out and make it real easy for the volunteers and the wilderness travelers to lend a hand. It takes very little time, and we've already been approached by people who are out there already in the woods and in a field. They're pretty innovative people, and some of them are pretty tech savvy too, and they're like, hey, we have an idea. We have some new ideas on how to collect data. We have some new ideas how to collect samples. We have some ideas about how to circumvent some of these physical barriers out there and get into areas where we can do some testing and sampling and certainly observations of invasives. That's all great. We want that kind of creativity. We want them to be part of this solution, and we want to modify and upgrade the entire wild spotter system as needed, so we keep making it better and better. We're already doing some of that right now. Same thing for volunteer recruitment and coordination. We found that the starter kits, some of these little packages of material that Randy has already gotten, they include some things like certificates and pins and stickers and some ball caps, some examples of some of the incentives and thank yous that we give to the volunteers for helping out. So let us know if you need more. We're really looking to try to expand on that. It really takes a lot of energy, and I would say our partners are a big part of the solution to that these days, because nothing's free, but we want to make it free to the volunteer. And a mentoring program, which is another part of this, is giving people a head start and then turning them loose, but sometimes they need a little mentoring along the way, helping each other out. A group that works on one forest or in one wilderness area might, help get another group going in another wilderness area. Or maybe they swap out, or maybe they travel to multiple places and they create these little groups of, like friends groups, for example, around wild spotter. All that's coming, and all that's what we're looking for. So any kind of creativity there is greatly appreciated. And I mentioned that earlier, marketing promotion. The technology is out there with the electronic social medias and various things. We rolled this out last year in 2018. The National Wild and Scenic Rivers Act was passed 50 years earlier. It's the 50th anniversary of that one, and also the National Trail System Act. Those are iconic connections to wilderness, and we actually rolled this whole program out on the 50th anniversary for both of those acts. On the right side of this picture, you'll notice there's a wild spotter exhibit display that we have a small version of here, you can see. And it just gives the outline of what the program is about and quick information, including the website, www.wildspotter.org. And more examples of other magazines that are continually added to the mix. These are print ads, so you'll get half-page or full-page ads in these magazines, endorsing and supporting the Wild Spotter program and giving people contact information. And each of these, and there's many others, by the way, they reach thousands, hundreds of thousands of people each year. Facebook, this is a wonderful tool. Despite the national security risk, it's something we all tend to like using. I don't even have a Facebook account, but I can tell you, everybody tells me I'm behind the times. So we have a Facebook page, we have a Facebook account, a lot of Facebook material is posted pretty regularly, a lot of friends. This is the way to go, social media, and we're really making progress. So join it, be a friend us at Facebook, and keep the dream alive. You'll notice here on this slide, you'll see some pictures of some of the printing items that we've done, and things like lapel pins, posters, brochures, stickers, rack cards. For those of you who go to hotels, you'll see the little lobby rack. It has all kinds of information in there for local areas. They're really easy, real simple. We tried to minimize this paper. It is good information sharing methodology, but we didn't do a lot of this, mostly because of waste. We want to save money and also keep people from reading something and then throwing it in the trash or throwing it on the ground. But it's still important, and it's a lot of good information that we still use these. So those are available to you if you need them. If you have to go to a conference or a meeting and you want to pass some information out, these are really quick, easy ways. The posters are great too. There's lots of versions of this, and in this case, the picture you see, they're laminated with a heavy laminate. So these are something you can put up at a kiosk or a visitor center or even in your local post office if they'll let you, and get the word out. So plenty of ways to communicate. Most important part, though, is partnerships. Partnerships with you guys and dozens of other organizations around the country. This is a tiny fraction of logos and imagery from some of the partners that have really stepped forward on WildSpotter. Can't emphasize enough the importance of these partners, their desire to do the right thing, their desire to fight invasives, their desire to marshal the resources they have and their interest groups and their networks and connect it back to WildSpotter. So part of what we do is promote others. So we want to promote what you're doing, what the partner's doing. It's not always just about what WildSpotter's doing. So if the partners in the backcountry hunters and anglers are out there making a difference in the backcountry in these wilderness areas to keep these public lands in public hands, we want to promote that, because that in turn is supporting the fight against invasive species, and their membership and their networks are all part of the solution. So helping others help us starts with promoting and supporting what they're doing. You'll notice on the website later, I'll show you this, the website has a whole section on partnerships and a whole section on promoting events and calendars of activities and programs and highlighting individuals and groups and showcasing what they're doing. So if the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance has an event coming up, or something on invasives that they're doing, or a local hike to go out and be wild spotters, or some other event that's really energizing the battle against invasives, let us know. We'll promote it for you for free. We'll put it on the website. We'll make the connection. We'll put links on there. We'll put your logo on there, and it runs from there on its own energy. And there's some big national program partners that we're tied into as well that are tied strictly to the invasive battle. These are big educational programs like Clean Drain Dry and Play Clean Go, Don't Let It Loose, which is a big program to help pet owners be responsible and not dump their pets into the natural areas after they're tired of keeping them. You know, this is how pythons end up in Florida and are moving our way north as the climate change warms the planet. So you got to keep your eye on those things and tie into what they're doing and support them and promote them, and that's what WildSpotter is all about. Burn it where you buy it. The whole campaign on firewood, not moving these pest-ridden woody materials, whether they be logs or sticks or other kind of things like mulch. If you move those things to a new area, you're just spreading the problem. And I'll leave you lastly here before we open it to questions with mappinginvasives@gmail.com. If you need to contact us directly on any of this, or if you're out there and you're having trouble with the app, or you want to do something special, this is the access point right here, mappinginvasives@gmail.com. It's monitored 24/7. We have people working on this at the University of Georgia full time, and it will connect back to anything we're doing in WildSpotter, and we can get you some answers and the support you need. So with that, I'll open it to questions and turn it back over to Randy.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. That was a very formative presentation about a very useful tool that we can all participate in our mapping of invasive species. But yes, there are a number of questions that have already come in. Let's just go right to the start. And so we've got a question from Donna Stevens. Can we use WildSpotter if our national forest isn't one of the pilot forests?
Yes, you can. The applications on the Android and the Apple apps will work pretty much anywhere on the planet. Technology will allow that to happen because your cell phone has that ability to georeference itself. So that's the only real technology problem. That's been overcome, and the same thing for the location that you do it on. So if you want to go out in the wilderness area or anywhere else on that national forest, and they're not part of the original pilot set that there's a lot of material built for, that's okay. You won't. The only difference is you're not going to have access to some of the special material that those wild places had built for them. So it'll be a little bit more streamlined, maybe a little bit more Spartan there. But the connections to ID information, the connection to the system itself, the queue, all that still is really functional. And actually, while we're answering questions, Randy, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck so we can get the website up so people can see the website, and we'll talk about that as we go.
Okay. Again, if you do have questions about the presentation or about any information about WildSpotter, please just type that question into the question function on the GoToWebinar dashboard, and we'll respond to them as we get there. I'm also joined today by Dave Cantrell, the NWSA Programs Committee Chair. And Dave, do you want to queue up the next question?
Absolutely. Zach Bumgarner asks, as a Forest Service partner organization collecting GIS data, is there a way for us to see data entered by our volunteers and add that to our system?
Yes, there is, and let Chuck answer some of the technology behind that.
Yeah, so all the data that is going into WildSpotter is available through the EdMaps platform once it's been reviewed and verified that the locations are correct. And so yes, that all of that information would be available to download through the EdMaps website, and if your group was doing this, and then we'd be glad to work with you to make sure you could have access to everything you needed.
All right. So Mike, next question. How were the original wild places selected, and what's the possibility for adding additional wild places like where I volunteer in northern Colorado?
So here's the history behind it. The first step was to kick this off with our forests and our regions to see if we had any willing, what we called pilot forests, to be part of this. And we were starting small. We didn't want to run into this without working out the kinks. This is a complicated effort, and these areas are different and unique themselves. So if you notice, there were 12 or 14, I think we had in the first round. And we went out through the regional offices, and they reached out to the forest and said, who would like to start to be part of this? And they jumped at it, and we kept it sort of minimized. The next year, we did the same thing. We sent out there. We got another list. I think we have 9 or 12 there as well. They want to join on. We have over 150 of these to do in the future. So we're moving slow. And I say at the same time, we're moving fast because the system will work anywhere. And the way this is functioning is really, everything's already covered. But if you go back to the special wild place information there, Chuck, What you'll notice is when we have a new wild place added, there's a lot of background built for this. So you'll have the information about the forest, there'll be maps tied into this. Chuck's working on a whole new system to add in all the different layers of trails and campsites and trail crossings and river crossings and all that sort of thing, and more details on each wilderness area. So, and of course, a special species list with all the ID material that forest wanted for that wilderness area. So that's a lot of work. That's a lot of construction to be done for special wild places to be added. So that's where our cost comes in. I'll be frank with you, those take time and money and technical programming and a lot of research. And so we took that first set of forests and we built those, and we continue to add to that. And the second set of forests, we're still kind of working on those, and we keep adding more and more. And if you want to add a new forest outside the scope of the Forest Service's, I guess, process for adding these, you're welcome to do that. What I'm saying is you can reach out to us and say, yes, we'd like to do something to help out here. We'd like to have our wilderness area added as a special wild place, and we'll work with you to see what we can do.
So I would also probably, so you're saying then that the stewardship groups that have an interest in being included in the Wild Spotter app should work with their local forest to encourage that forest to submit the information that goes into the app.
Correct. So part of the thing here is volunteers are independent and able to do any of this without sanctioning by the forest. You can go out in the wilderness area anytime you want, and you can go out there and click out in your app and collect data anytime you want in that wilderness area. You don't even have to let the National Forest people know you did that, and that's fine. But a closer relationship would be better. So you go out there and say, hey, we're a group of people who like to visit here a lot. We care about this wilderness area. We're watching over it for you. We're volunteering out here, and we'd like to see a special wild place added to Wild Spotter, and it would be this forest. What do you think? And if the forest says, yeah, we can do that, or we'd be interested, it would be better than if you did it without them. You see what I'm saying? It's not difficult to do. It just takes a little time and energy on their part, but once it's done, it's done. You know, it's a one-time expense on their end.
Okay. I think that probably answered a couple of the other questions we had. One of our partners from Wild South asked, can you import the data that's already collected in the past? And especially from the partner standpoint, do they have access to the data?
So this is Chuck. Yeah. And I'm getting an echo. You absolutely can get with us and send us the data. If you register through the EdMaps website, on the EdMaps website, there is a place where you can go in and submit bulk data. And so any kind of spreadsheet or shape file that you have the data in, we can take and we'll add in, and then that data would be part of the Wild Spotter project as well. So there's a My Upload tab under My EdMaps, and then there's an Upload Data, and you can send the data through this and just name it something appropriate, and tag it as Wild Spotter in this name, and that will help us make it a priority to get the data in.
One of the things we're doing also is we're taking existing Forest Service data that we collect on our own through our own people with our own data set, which is different than Wild Spotter. And I'll explain that briefly. The Forest Service has a much more complicated data collection system for a lot of our activities, including invasives work. It's through major federal firewall systems that you can't get into or out of very easily. But we do collect data on invasive species occurrences. And so we are uploading that into Wild Spotter, which is external system for the average person to use, and that will show up on the map. So when you're in there in the wilderness area, you can see the existing populations that we've already mapped on that trail, for example, or on that river or up in the mountain somewhere. And it helps you limit the duplication, for example. So there's things like that we're trying to do to streamline.
Okay.
This is,
Dave.
yeah, I would like to jump in with something. Randy, as you mentioned, there are half a dozen questions that have to do with how to apply the app when your forest is not yet listed as one of the partner or as one of the partner forests. And I think you've answered that beautifully, unless others have questions. But Phil Huff asks a great question that I think covers part of that. Will there be some rollout from the appropriate national forest to local partner groups? In other words, how do we coordinate our efforts at volunteer recruitment with other efforts? And what I would add to that is any more insights about how to work with our forests for the most coordinated possible effort would seem to me to be very helpful.
Yeah, I'll try to answer that. So each of these units are unique and different. At the same time, they're under the same national forest system. So if you're in a local area and you have a local national forest that you haven't gotten to know, the staff there, maybe it's the wilderness coordinator, maybe it's the local range contact, or maybe someone who works in the fisheries or wildlife shop, or maybe it's a person who works in the forest as a firefighter. Try to make a connection to them and then get in there and talk to the leadership, either the district rangers or the forest supervisors or the staff officers. Those lead people in those national forests are your contacts. Get in there, set up a meeting with them, go out and have coffee or a beer, whatever makes your day, and get to know them and say, hey, look, here's what we're doing for you. Here's what we want to do for you. Here's what we're doing to help wilderness and the rest of your forest, and turn us loose. We're wild spotters. It's your program. We want to support it, and tell them that it's necessary for them to do their part to help you be successful. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes they're just busy. And I'll be frank with you. I've had national forests that tell me, don't send me volunteers. We don't have time for volunteers. We don't have the people to coordinate volunteers. And we're worried if you turn a whole bunch of people loose on us, it'll overwhelm our forces. We cannot manage this properly, and we're worried the data is going to be bad. That's almost a quote. So my response to that is, you're right. I get it. I've been in your shoes. I've been out there. I've been a public land manager all over the country. And if you are not comfortable with volunteers helping you, it's difficult to accept what they give you. So you have to start slow. Start by building a relationship. And they don't have the staff. That's part of the reason we need volunteers. And sometimes they think they don't have staff. That means they can't coordinate volunteers. If you could show them that we designed Wild Spotter so that the volunteer is fully empowered, it's done in such a simple manner that there won't be any risk or very low risk of any kind of mistakes or accidents or problems from a data collection standpoint, it really lightens their load. It makes it easy for them to accept the fact that you're able to go out there with all the tools of Wild Spotter and come back with really good information that they can use. And you remember, you're only looking for three things in data. You're looking for what you found, where you found it, and how much you found. You know, even I can do that. And that's how simple this is. The what you found is the species. The where you found it is told to you by what your phone tells you. All right? Georeference phones will do this for you. And if you want to use a crayon or a topo map, because you're really good at mapping on these wilderness trails, you're happy to do that too. And we can make that work. And the same thing for the how much you found. Chuck's got a system built in here now that makes it real easy to tell you how much you got. You don't have to be an expert. You don't need a tape measure. You don't need to weigh anything. You just need to tell them generally, because it's early detection and rapid response. We just need a general idea. Is it big as a basketball? Is it big as a Volkswagen? Is it big as a school bus? Things like that. So they got ways to make this simpler for the volunteer, which makes them more effective, which makes it easier for them to function without someone holding their hand. And it makes the load on the force lighten up because they don't have to worry about sending somebody out in the backcountry every time you want to be a wild spot.
So, Mike, that brings up a couple of other questions that have been asked. One is, okay, so a volunteer enters data into WildSpotter. How is that data then used? Does it generate reports to the forest? Does it get somehow summarized up and displayed? What's actually the steps of the use of the data once it's entered into the system and uploaded?
Yes. Okay. So remember, there's two kinds of data that we're using for management: the data we collect and the data the volunteers have to collect. And both of those data sets are merged together to give us a picture of what we have out there on the ground. You can't manage something if you don't know where it is, if you don't know it exists. So the first step here is finding and mapping it. Second step is to validate and voucher it. And once we get those populations and those infestations validated and vouchered through that EDMAP system, it will send us the information so we can upload that back into our data set, into the Forest Service system, which is all behind the firewall. And then that allows us to set those priorities based on those invasions. You remember, it's all geospatially oriented. Everything we put in there has got a polygon and a location, so we know exactly where it is. And that helps us look at a map and tell ourselves where the problems are, where we should put the frontline defenses in, where we should do prevention, where we should do early detection and rapid response, and where control and containment happens. So ultimately, the idea here is we need to stop and remove these exotic species before they get established. That's difficult work, but if you can't find them, there's no chance that you can do it at all. So first step is finding them.
So, Mike, along that line, once the data is entered up and uploaded into the federal system, assuming that the federal managers then take some eradication actions, what's the feedback process or mechanism to remove areas off the map once that treatment has occurred and has been successful?
Yeah, exactly why we have that contact information here. Be built into the system. So we want to keep connected to the volunteer. So I'll start with the first part of this is giving us a little tough love is not always bad. So if you know that you found it, and we let you know that we received your information, and we let you know that we're moving towards doing something about it, it helps you follow up with us and say, are you taking care of that wilderness like you promised? Are you meeting your wilderness stewardship requirements? Because we have standards and direction on policy for managing invasives in wilderness area, and we are actually, our performance is accounted for to make sure we're meeting the minimum standards and requirements on our stewardship responsibility for those wilderness areas. Same thing goes for other parts of the forest that are not wilderness areas. So there's a feedback loop right there built in that's actually formalized in our system. So we can tell people that, you know, you're falling short of your wilderness stewardship responsibilities because you have not followed through on the requirements within the agency, beginning with dealing with the known invasions that you found in those wilderness areas. The public can help us. The feedback from the public is, if you're out there and you're also aware of those invasions, you can come knocking on the forest supervisor's door and say, hey, let's go have another cup of coffee or drink a beer and let's talk about what we just spent time to do for you and what you're planning on doing about it.
All right, Dave, do you have any other questions?
There was one question that came in very late, and I don't know if you have time for it. I think we need to be wrapping up here. The volunteer manager for the Rio Grande National Forest asks, we're doing invasive data collection through iNaturalist. can you possibly import data from iNaturalist into WildSpotter?
So yes, we have already imported a fair amount of the invasive species data from iNaturalist that is at the research grade level, and that easily flows into the EdMap system on a routine basis. And if we can, I'll be glad to work with you. And if you've got some data that's not research grade through iNaturalist, then figure out the best way to make that data available through EdMaps and through WildSpotter.
Great. And a question which goes in the other direction. If someone records data from a given area, and there's a friends group there already collecting independent data, how can they obtain that and get it incorporated into their data set?
So I think
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that goes back a little bit to being able to download the data and pull the data from EdMaps, the background system that runs this. One of the things, and I should have mentioned this when I was talking about iNaturalist, one of the things that we're trying to do with WildSpotter is with iNaturalist, you can record data with the GIS app you're talking about. You can record data. We're trying to include the educational component into WildSpotter that's not part of those other platforms. And so when you pull up a wild place in WildSpotter, you can view information and pictures about the species that you're looking for, and as well as some general information about the area. And we're going to continue to improve that with some maps and with pulling in the existing data to really make it an interactive platform. And be welcome to work with y'all on ways that, things you like about iNaturalist, things that you like about the app you're using for GIS, and help him continue to build and improve WildSpotter. But we really think that educational component to WildSpotter is what can help set it apart from other programs such as iNaturalist.
Yeah, there's really, from Forest Service data set, we basically have, from a volunteer citizen science standpoint, the only one that's focused on invasives is WildSpotter. And that's the externally driven kind of thing. The other ones are inside the agency within the Forest Service firewall.
All right. Well, Mike and Chuck, we want to thank you so much for bringing us the information about WildSpotter to our Wilderness Stewardship community audience today. We wish you very much success in this effort, and we hope to look for other opportunities to share the WildSpotter message with the wilderness community. So everybody, we're going to close this webinar off for today. I think we got the questions answered that were asked, and look forward to seeing all of you again on our next webinar scheduled for March 12th, where we're going to have a panel of long distance trail organizations talking about how wilderness stewardship groups can work with the long distance trail organizations to better serve wilderness interests. So look forward to seeing you there. That'll be March 12th. 1 o'clock Mountain Time, I think, if I got that right. The information will come out soon. So thanks, everybody. This is Randy Welsh of the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance saying goodbye.